Chapter 1: The Face We Gave God. From the book God is the Quantum Field, Rewriting the Name of the Divine Through Energy, Entanglement, and Awareness. Introduction. When God took a face, it began with mystery. It became metaphor, and then it hardened into a face with eyes, a voice, a beard, a gender, a personality, a face placed in the sky and called God. But what happens when the infinite is given an image? What happens when a formless field is pressed into form and named He? This chapter is not a rejection of the divine. It is a reckoning with the image that replaced the truth. The face we gave God became a mirror, but not of the field, only of our fears, our politics, our needs. This chapter will unveil the cultural construction of God's face, expose its historical roots, deconstruct its psychological effects, and liberate the soul to meet the faceless presence that science, spirit, and silence all reveal. History: from force to father, from presence to person. In the earliest cultures, the divine was not a ruler. It was a pattern, a rhythm, a force woven into wind, tide, womb, flame, and death. As Mircea Eliade details in The Sacred and the Profane, prehistoric societies experienced time and space as sacred cycles, not under command of a deity, but animated by the mystery of the living cosmos. There were no commandments, only cosmic participation. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and early Indus traditions, deities were multiplicities of expression, mirroring nature, elements, the body, and story. But with the rise of empire, God began to take on human form. As Reza Aslan explains in God, A Human History, humans projected their own image onto the divine, not out of malice, but out of survival. A God with a face could be spoken to. A God with rules could provide order. A God who resembled kings could preserve kingdoms. And so the image was born. In Babylon, Marduk. In Greece, Zeus. In Israel, Yahweh, eventually translated as the Lord. This transformation from presence to person allowed religious systems to control access to the divine. As Karen Armstrong reminds us in The Battle for God, monotheism did not just unify religion, it centralized spiritual authority. Once God had a face, he also had a voice. And that voice began to speak through select men, in specific languages, from specific altars. The people were no longer invited to experience the field. They were required to obey the face. 2. Science. The problem with personifying the infinite day. The problem with giving the divine a face is not only theological, it is scientific. As the age of enlightenment progressed, the idea of a personalized deity began to conflict with the mechanics of reality. The universe did not behave like a king's court. It behaved like a field of probability. With the rise of quantum theory, as detailed in Stephen Hawking's The Grand Design, the notion of a divine architect standing outside creation was replaced by a vision of reality where laws emerge from fields and where creation is a self-arising phenomenon. Even Albert Einstein, though he often spoke of God, clarified that his God was Spinoza's God, not a person, but the totality of the cosmos in motion. Quantum field theory shows us that reality is not constructed by a central agent issuing commands. Instead, as Sean Carroll writes in The Particle at the End of the Universe, reality arises from vibrating fields, interacting locally, fluctuating constantly, governed not by whim, but by mathematical coherence. So where does that leave a face-shaped God? Nowhere to be found in particle physics. Nowhere necessary in cosmology. And yet, nowhere denied in consciousness. Science does not reject God. Science rejects the face we gave God. Because to project personality onto the field is to confuse the expression with the essence. A face is a metaphor, but the field is presence without boundary. It does not need eyes to see. It is the seeing. 3. Philosophy, the invention of He. To name God as He was never just a linguistic decision. It was a philosophical weapon. The moment the divine was gendered, it was hierarchized. As Mary Daly powerfully declared in Beyond God the Father, if God is male, then the male is God. A theology of patriarchy became a metaphysics of control. This philosophical distortion entrenched itself in law, society, and self-worth. Simone de Beauvoir in The Second Sex explains how women were historically seen as the other, not because of nature, but because of the religious and philosophical structures that derived authority from a masculinized God. And in the Western philosophical canon, from Plato to Augustine to Descartes, God was increasingly described as pure mind, untouched by matter, detached from emotion, above creation. This dualism, spirit versus flesh, heaven versus earth, God versus human, created the epistemological illusion that to get closer to the divine, we had to leave ourselves behind. But if God is the quantum field, present in every vibration, unfolding as every thought, entangled with every cell, then God has no gender, no hierarchy, no opposition. As Alan Watts taught in the book On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are, Jesus Christ knew he was God. So wake up and find out eventually that you are too. The face we gave God was just a mirror we feared to look into. But now we must return it to silence and meet the divine again as what always was, faceless, fielded, free. Spirit, the field before the image. Across spiritual traditions, beneath all the temples and images, the field has always remained. Before there was Our Father who art in heaven, there was breath. Before there was in the beginning God created, there was stillness. The Upanishads whispered of Brahman, not as creator or ruler, but as the unstruck sound, the undivided whole. In Taoism, the Tao is not a god at all, but the originless origin, a way, not a person. And in Christian mysticism, figures like Julian of Norwich and Meister Eckhart spoke not of a distant judge, but of a living presence within all things. As Richard Rohr writes in The Universal Christ, Christ is not Jesus' last name, but the name for the universal pattern of presence. The Spirit has never needed a face. It only needed space. It only needed remembrance. The field was never asking to be worshipped. It was asking to be recognized. And now, in the crumbling of old forms, the Spirit returns, not with a new image, but with no image at all. Only vibration, only frequency, only truth. Conclusion. The face was ours, not God's. The face we gave God was not God's. It was ours, a reflection of our need for safety, our fear of chaos, our longing for order in a world we didn't understand. But the face became a mask, and the mask became a doctrine, and the doctrine became a gate. We were taught to enter that gate only through belief, obedience, or suffering, and we forgot that the field never required a gate at all. It was already within us. The personality of God became a projection of the empire. The Father wound, the judge, the king. But God, the real one, never asked to be personified, never asked to be feared, never demanded to be named. The quantum field does not reward the righteous or punish the wicked. It responds to resonance. It mirrors your frequency, not your morality. To give the divine a face is not wrong. It is simply partial. And now the age of partiality is over. This is the age of the whole, the age of the field. You are not here to reject the name of God. You are here to expand it until it contains all things again. This is the chapter where God becomes real. Not because you believe harder, but because you finally let the false face dissolve. And when it does, you will not find emptiness. You will find everything. You will find the divine beneath the image, beneath the gender, beneath the fear, as the field that has always been. Awakening questions. 1. What face were you taught to give to God, and where did it come from? 2. Can you trace how the image of God has shaped your self-image? 3. Are you ready to release the personality of the divine in exchange for the presence of it? 4. What happens in your body when you consider that God is not a he, but a field of awareness and energy? Final 4 lines. We made God in our image, then feared the image we made. Now the mask falls, and the field remains.